Welcome, everyone, to Catholic Sunday Scriptures in Context. This is a ministry of the Augustinian Order as well as St. Paul Parish, the soul and the heart of the Italian market in South Philly at 9th and Christian Street, where I am the pastor of the parish. Today we are talking about the 19th Sunday in Ordinary Time, August 6th and 7th. So our first reading comes from the Book of Wisdom. The night of the Passover was known beforehand to our fathers, that with sure knowledge of the oaths in which they put their faith, they might have courage. Your people awaited the salvation of the just and the destruction of their foes. For when you punished our adversaries, in this you glorified us whom you had summoned. For in secret the holy children of the good were offering sacrifice and putting into effect with one accord the divine institution. Again, some of the key words here. Remember, we're talking about the Passover and their faith that the people had, and they are rewarded for their faith. So this reading is really about the fidelity of God and that our God is a faithful God. So a couple things about the Book of Wisdom. It is not in the Hebrew Scriptures nor in the Protestant Bible because it was not originally written in Hebrew, which was a qualification for both of those. And actually this book was written very late. One of the dates has it around the year 50 BC, and it was written in Alexandria in Egypt, which was a center of Jewish thought at the time. And the Book of Wisdom, and this passage in particular, is really a reflection of Jewish history and not a telling of it. The lesson here is that God stood by his people, and as he did so then, he will stand by us now and be with us. And when God punished the adversaries of his people, he glorified his chosen ones and rewarded them for their faithfulness. And the lesson is that those who were oppressors are now the oppressed. The last part of that reading, we're not really clear about what the message says or what it means. And there are various interpretations of it, which we will not get into here. Our second reading is from the letter to the Hebrews. Brothers and sisters, faith is the realization of what is hoped for and evidence of things not seen. Because of it, the ancients were well attested. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to a place that he was to receive as an inheritance. He went out, not knowing where he was to go. By faith, he sojourned in the promised land as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, heirs of the same promise. For he was looking forward to the city with foundations, whose architect and maker is God. By faith, he received power to generate, even though he was past the normal age. And Sarah herself was sterile, for he thought that the one who had made the promise was trustworthy. So it was that there came forth from one man, himself as good as dead, descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky and as countless as the sands on the seashore. All these died in faith. They did not receive what had been promised, but saw it and greeted it from afar and acknowledged themselves to be strangers and aliens on the earth. For those who speak thus show that they are seeking a homeland. If they had been thinking of the land from which they had come, they would have had opportunity to return. But now they desire a better homeland, a heavenly one. Therefore God is not ashamed to be called their God, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith Abraham, when put to the test, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises was ready to offer his only son, of whom it was said, through Isaac descendants shall bear your name. He reasoned that God was able to raise even from the dead, and he received Isaac back as a symbol. So again, the focus here is on faith, and this is really a coincidence that all three readings focus on this message. Hebrews, this letter to the Hebrews is not by Paul, and there was a lot of controversy about including it in the New Testament or the Christian scriptures. It wasn't until relatively late that this letter, as well as the book of Revelation, were added to the New Testament. This passage for today's reading is probably the best known part of the letter to the Hebrews, with its definition of faith. It is what we hope for and the assurance of what we do not see. Abraham's life was the best example of faith. What was promised him was not seen by him, and his example of faith allowed us to have what we have. And in the reading, it focuses on three events. One, when he was promised new land. Second, that in his old age he would have a child. And then it makes that commentary. And then right at the end, as you saw in the highlighted letters, it talks about the sacrifice of Isaac, which is really the archetype of the sacrifice of Jesus, when you give your only son, or willingness to give your only son. And here, what is really important in the letter to the Hebrews, it speaks of the promised land not as a piece of earth, but as a heavenly one. Our gospel is from Luke, and it is more discussions for the disciples and instruction about how they should be disciples. Jesus said to his disciples, "Do not be afraid any longer, little flock, for your Father is pleased to give you the kingdom. Sell your belongings and give alms. Provide money bags for yourselves that do not wear out, an inexhaustible treasure in heaven, that no thief can reach nor moth destroy. For where your treasure is, there also will your heart be. Gird your loins and light your lamps, and be like servants who await their master's return from a wedding, ready to open immediately when he comes and knocks. Blessed are those servants whom the master finds vigilant on his arrival. Amen, I say to you, he will gird himself, have them recline at table, and proceed to wait on them. And should he come in the second or third watch and find them prepared in this way, blessed are those servants. Be sure of this, if the master of the house had known the hour when the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be prepared, for at an hour you do not expect the Son of Man will come." Then Peter said, "Lord, is this parable meant for us or for everyone?" And the Lord replied, "Who then is the faithful and prudent steward whom the master will put in charge of his servants to distribute the food allowance at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master on arrival finds doing so. Truly I say to you, the master will put the servant in charge of all his property. But if that servant says to himself, 'My master is delayed in coming,' and begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants, to eat and drink and get drunk, then that servant's master will come on an unexpected day and at an unknown hour, and will punish the servant severely and assign him a place with the unfaithful. That servant who knew his master's will but did not make preparations, nor act in accord with his will, shall be beaten severely. And the servant who was ignorant of his master's will, but acted in a way deserving of a severe beating, shall be beaten only lightly. Much will be required of the person entrusted with much, and still more will be demanded of the person entrusted with more." So the theme here is readiness and watchfulness. It is, in a sense, talking about the coming of the Son of Man. So Luke's Gospel was written around the year 80, 85, 90. And by this time, the first generations of Christians, many of them had died. And the Romans had come and destroyed the city of Jerusalem. And there, in the early church, was an expectation that there was the imminent coming of Christ as the end of the world. So this deals with this sort of idea of delay. You don't know when the Son of Man is going to come. By using the term, "my little flock," it is a term of endearment. And this is really a story of loving concern that Jesus has for the disciples. In this section of Luke's Gospel, none of the stories are initiated by adversaries, but rather is Jesus giving true teaching to his disciples. God will provide what you need. You should not worry. Don't build up wealth just for the sake of having wealth. God has all the things you need. And Jesus will set the example. The Master Jesus becomes the servant, and he turns the social order on its head. And that's what Jesus said earlier, "I have come not to be served, but to serve, and to give my life as a ransom for the many." The things that the world considers as important, Jesus thinks that serving is important. And if you know more will be expected of you. Be concerned about heavenly riches, not earthly ones. And the main thing here is, as a disciple, you will be held accountable. If you proclaim the Christian faith, then you must live the Christian faith. Please continue to pray for peace in Ukraine, and if you think this presentation would be helpful to anyone, please pass it on, and I certainly welcome your comments. Thank you very much.